So the most important bill going through Congress that nobody's talking about, it's the Innovate Act. It's the bill that funds the SBIR STTR program and keeps it alive. With the pending government shutdown, I see there being a lapse, which I think will be the first time in history that there's a lapse in the Innovate program or the SBIR STTR program. The Innovate Act is going to reform this program and potentially even make it a permanent program. There's lots of different options on the table. The House and Senate both passed different versions of what it means to have a SBIR STTR program through their own versions of the Innovate Act. But this act likely will not get the attention it needs while the government is in this pending shutdown phase. So September 30th, the SBIR STTR program no longer will be funded and no longer effectively exist as law until they reauthorize it. It needs to be reauthorized. It's one of the most consequential programs for small business. It unlocks billions of dollars for small businesses every year. It helps universities get after their funding initiatives as well. And it's been a super valuable tool for the department to bring in new technology into the government. So what are some of the things are packed into this year's Innovate Act? Well, the first thing, and probably the most controversial thing, is that they're trying to put a cap on SBIR mills. So SBIR mills are companies that have achieved $75 million or more in the SBIR program or received that much money from the program. And in many cases haven't actually transitioned much. They want to put a cap. So anyone that's got 75 million bucks out of SBIR, you're no longer eligible. This is in the Senate version and it's not in the House version. Apparently there's a group of lobbyists, I hear they're out of Massachusetts, that are really lobbying hard to kill that version of the bill because they want SBIR mills to continue. They say it unfairly harms companies that have been in the SBIR program since the 1980s. Could be true, maybe not true, but that's the most controversial piece of this. There's a lot of other really good stuff in the bill though. One of the things that's in there is for the ability to do supercharged contracts out of SBIRs. I forget what they're calling it, but it effectively allows you to go up to $30 million for a single contract action using SBIR dollars. So within the SBIR program, you have your traditional phase 1 and phase 2, which I've talked ad nauseum about, but just for a refresher, phase 1s are normally where you find your product market fit. They're smaller dollars. Phase 2s are where you're gonna have some type of prototyping at the end, but it's for more mature projects or technologies where you're gonna be able to show something tangible at the end of the contract performance. From there, you can do something called a sequential phase 2. Now there's lots of different schemes or programs around sequential phase 2s, but all that means is that they're still leveraging money that's in the SBIR pot to go do more work on that technology or product. So AFWERX has TACFIs and STRATFIs. There's the OTST program that OSD runs, the Navy, Army, and Marine Corps. They all have their own programs for sequential phase 2s. Well, there are statutory limits for how high those programs can go. And that's what's going to change with the Innovate Act. At least in the Senate version, it allows you to go up to 30 million bucks. That would be a pretty big game changer. Now, most sequential phase 2s, if not all of them, require some type of matching funds from the unit. So how do you go find matching funds? Well, the unit's got to care about what you're doing, but it's challenging. Now, there's a 1-for-1 match that is going to be statutorily required if the Innovate Act passes to get that $30 million hit that mark. Finding $30 million in a program office to go do a thing is not easy. No one has an extra 30 million bucks laying around. It's just not how the government works typically, but there's lots of ways to hack the match. So congressional interest items or getting Congress involved early in the process, they can actually be your matching funds. And we've done this to a great extent in the programs I've worked, both in the CDAO, the Digital Transformation Office, and inside AFWERX, where we've used the matching funds from an ad that Congress gave, and that unlocked money from the SBIR pot as a sequential phase 2, you name the form or fashion of it. But that's a really big piece of the Innovate Act. I think where people kind of get stuck is the percentages of, or even how the money gets populated from the SBIR program. So it could be lots of different percentages coming out of these different bills. There's a thought that more percentage will go towards SBIR versus STTR. STTR requires the universities to be engaged at least 30% or nonprofit entity. Whereas if you go down the pathway of a traditional SBIR, that's much more popular program. There's more money involved. What those percentages are determine how big the pot is. So let's just assume the percentage comes out to be 3.75% of the rdt&e budget. That means all of the research and development funds that the government appropriates for the Department of Defense will have a tax applied to them of that 3.75%. That 3.75% will then be carved off of each appropriation and go into a general bucket. Now, the way it works today is that each service kind of handles their own bucket. So the Air Force decided to let AFWERX control its SBIR budget. OSD's SBIR STTR office controls the DoD's SBIR budget. The Navy has their scheme for how they control the budget. Everyone has their own way they control their budgets. There's a very small amount of money that OSD's SBIR STTR office gets to oversee the entire program. And then within each department's budget, they can take 5% of their total SBIR budget and use it for administrative costs. So that's personnel, that is buying things that are going to help the overall program, be it software tools or something else. But that's kind of it. In the new Innovate Act, there might be a possibility for OSD SBIR STTR, which is the overarching SBIR STTR office run by some pretty phenomenal people. There could be an opportunity for them to actually tax the services so they can create larger overarching initiatives to help streamline a lot of the SBIR stuff that's going on. I am a huge fan of that. One, because I know the intent and the people that are behind the OSD SBIR STTR office, and I think they're going to do a phenomenal job if they get that extra authority. But two, there needs to be a little bit more cohesion amongst the services when it comes to how you function in SBIR STTR. I was part of AFWERX when it first started, and AFWERX was the inventor of the open topic, which I was involved in. And the open topic has had its highs and lows, from being like something that was revered as a phenomenal way to get new companies and new tech in, to being something that, is hard to manage, hard to oversee, gets so many proposals that it's a bear for organizations to execute against, and has relatively opaque transition success. In my view of the world, I think small bets spread widely could yield some outsized results. And I believe the open topic gave the government that approach. The Air Force has always kind of taken that approach to innovation, like, hey, let's bet on a bunch of things and see what shakes. The Navy, others, the Army, they would actually put people in charge of innovation, and they would own innovation for their orgs, and ultimately would focus on the transition piece, but they would fund far less projects. So the things they knew about, they would make sure they put the structure around so they would have success. But the stuff that the unknown unknowns, the things that could come out of a really good SBIR proposal, I think they missed, frankly. So between those two, the right answer is somewhere in there, right? But if OSD SBIR STTR office, so the DoD-level SBIR STTR office, had the ability to actually pool funding from the different departments and create its own offering, there would be more cohesion, there'd be more clarity, and clarity will help the companies right out of the gate, because there's so many different ways to engage with the government. Not having that clarity from a company perspective makes them bifurcate all their resources across the different services, instead of just understanding, this is how I go do SBIR, this is how I go apply, this is how I execute. So I'm excited about what the Innovate Act could do for the department. I know the Innovate Act will eventually pass, even if there is a lapse in the program. Like, it's got bipartisan support across the board. Congress likes it because members from all their different delegations are getting contract awards, and it's creating jobs. And we all know small business is the driver of any economy, especially in these small regional markets. So I know it's going to pass, but having the lapse, if it does indeed lapse, it will have an impact, and it's definitely going to slow stuff down. We were tracking that FY26 got passed in a reasonable amount of time. The OC SBIR STTR office would actually have almost 2 years worth of money all at the same time, because all of FY25 was done as a continuing resolution. And because their money is brought in as a percentage or a scrape off of the rdt&e appropriation, they're the last ones in line to actually receive their money from the budget office. It all has to get kind of penciled out and put in the different program elements, and then they scrape it off to say, all right, well, the law says this percentage goes to the SBIR program. Well, everyone tracked what happened in FY25, where we had a full year CR. So that money came late. FY26 would have happened on time. OC SBIR STTR would have some serious bucks to play with to be able to execute in FY26. They'd have their 2-year FY25 money, and second year of execution, it would have a full 2 years to execute the FY26 money. With the lapse, I mean, they're not focused on execution now. They're focused on getting policy out to all the different departments on, hey, what does it look like if the program isn't authorized anymore? Can we still do new awards if with old money? What are some of the policies and procedures around that? So a lapse does nobody any good. So if you're a small business and you benefited from this program, or you have aspirations to be part of this program in the future, you can take action. Go write Congress. You have a congressional member that represents your district. You can write them and let them know how important the Innovate Act is to you and your business and their community. You can also write the Senate. The Senate knows that it's important. This program has launched huge companies. I mean, we got to go to the New York Stock Exchange and bang the gavel for companies that hit the unicorn status, billion-dollar status, that started in the SBIR program. So I know it's a valuable program. The Innovate Act is the conduit to getting it real, and I would love it to see the program just become codified. Like, we don't have to go through reauthorization. It just is real. So anyways, if you like what you hear, please subscribe, like the channel, like the videos, and I have a lot more content for you to help. Have a great day.